Battling Boko Haram, Nigeria's new president travels to Cameroon to bolster a cross-border campaign. Why does Boko Haram appear to still have the upper hand? And is Nigeria's president failing in his election pledge to eradicate the group? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Haram Seeker. Relations between Nigeria and Cameroon have been strained for years. Territorial disputes, especially over the Bakassi Peninsula oil-rich region, haven't helped. Now the neighbors are uniting in a desperate fight, the battle against Boko Haram fighters and their campaign to impose strict Islamic law. Suicide bomb attacks have risen dramatically. As the military pushes Boko Haram from smaller towns, its fighters are targeting more densely populated areas. Ahmed Idris reports from Gombe, a commercial hub hit by a wave of bomb attacks.
Umar Abubakar has been floating in and out of consciousness for a week now. One of the victims of the last suicide bomb attacks in Gombe. He and his father, the breadwinners of the family, are fighting for their lives. Their small businesses are completely destroyed. His recovery is a long way off. As in many areas of the Northeast, similar cases are now common after recent rise in suicide bomb attacks.
The injured, they have all sorts of traumas, physical and mental. And there's something that is called post-stress distress syndrome, which our psychiatrists have to manage, our psychologists have to manage.
For now, that is a predicament facing many in hospitals here.
Most of the patients in this ward are victims of Boko Haram attacks. Over the last 6 months, hundreds of dead and injured have passed through here. The hospital has seen a significant increase in the number of victims as Boko Haram fighters increasingly target civilians with suicide bomb attacks.
The socio-economic costs of the attacks continue to pile up. Abdul Qadir Adamu is a father of 7 who was injured just as he finished work. He's afraid of going back to work or going near a crowd.
The risks are just too much. You are under threat at the station. You are a target at home or on the highway. There are threats everywhere. But you have a family to feed. If I can get a safer job and away from here, I will just leave.
He is not alone. Many traders and businesses have been destroyed by these attacks, and families impoverished. The priority now is to avoid being hit. Fears of another attack are never far off. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
So let's take a look at Boko Haram's expansion over the years. Well, since it emerged in 2009, Boko Haram has focused its attacks in northern Nigeria. But recently, it's been branching out in neighboring Cameroon and Chad. Amnesty International says about 17,000 people have been killed by Boko Haram in the last 6 years. The United Nations says almost 2 million have been forced from their homes. And President Muhammadu Buhari, who was elected in March, campaigned on his promise of protecting the people by defeating Boko Haram. Since his inauguration at the end of May, 830 people have been killed in Boko Haram attacks. That's double the monthly rate of attacks under former President Goodluck Jonathan. Well, joining us now from the Cameroonian capital, Yaoundé, is Issa Boukari, the Minister of Communication for Cameroon and a spokesman for the Cameroon government. Thank you for being with us. Now, I want to ask you, first of all, how does the government in Cameroon view the visit by the Nigerian president and the threat from Boko Haram?
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity. Very friendly and wholeheartedly, we had the opportunity to welcome President Buhari, who landed this morning in our nation. The head of state, the government, the Cameroonian, all the nation, all of us very much pleased and ready to welcome him. And really, we are looking forward to giving the best we can in order to make it as successful as possible.
As you know, cooperation between these two countries hasn't been at the best recently, but are you confident then that you can effectively coordinate this operation with Nigeria against Boko Haram?
The two nations are bound by history, geography, and many other things. Today we have a common enemy, the scourge in our region, the cancer that we have to eradicate. We have to put aside what in the past might have been a cause of division, but to be a forward-looking nation, forward-looking people, in order to address, in order to curb, in order to deal with Boko Haram problem. By coming together, by putting together the intelligent information, by putting together, by mutualizing our military all capability, it's going to be just a matter of coordination. But at the end of the day, we are convinced that because we have no choice to get rid of Boko Haram.
In terms of the coordination, though, with Nigeria, our understanding, though, is Nigeria is going to essentially take the lead in this, with Cameroon providing extra troops, but the top command is going to come from Nigeria. Is that something that the Cameroonian government is comfortable with?
It doesn't matter at all. The problem, what is at the stake? What is at stake is to get rid of this cancer. How to eradicate it? The military, the five nations of the front line, they are going to meet and to put in place a very efficient coordination which will enable them really to deliver the battle, the one that has to be delivered, to fight Boko Haram, to chase them down, to run them down. This count much. You see, as far as how it's going to take place, who will be comfortable or not, this is something of the past. We are forward-looking people, ready to listen once that the best coordination according to military and civilian operation who will assist them, once this is put in place, really let them start.
You talk there about rooting out what you call the cancer that is Boko Haram. But the criticism is, though, that more needs to be done, that this can't be just a security solution, that much more needs to be done by both Cameroon and Nigeria towards getting at the root problems, the economic and social problems in this region that give rise to a group like Boko Haram. What do you say to that, and should more be done?
No aspect of this problem should be neglected. The military aspect, the social aspect, the economic aspect, all those problems deserve to receive due consideration, and the right solution should be found and addressed. That reason why we agree with you that the solution cannot only be a military one. Indeed, by coordinating, by mutualizing, by putting together all the capability, the equipment, the five countries of the front line have, it is possible, okay, to strike them decisive blow. But we agree with your analysis. There is economic aspect of it, there is social aspect of it, and all of those aspects should be given due consideration in order to implement all of them in harmony once they conceive the right game plan.
Mr. Issa Bukhari, thank you very much for talking to us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much indeed. Merci Al Jazeera, merci beaucoup, thank you.
Well, time now to bring in our guest to talk more about this. We have Martin A. Ewi, who is a senior researcher for the International Crime in Africa program. He joins us from Pretoria. And joining us from London via Skype, we have Imad Mesdua, political analyst with Africa Matters. Good to have you both with us. Martin Ewi, if I could start with you then, what do you make of this plan by Nigeria's president, this joint operation with Cameroon against Boko Haram?
I think Buhari's visit to Cameroon is, I think, probably one of his most important trips that he has made since coming to power, and part of his diplomatic campaign to build the regional alliance against Boko Haram. It is the most important trip in the sense that Cameroon is hugely important for the fight against Boko Haram, given the country's role in the origin of the group itself. So I think that the discussion between Buhari and Biya is going to be a frank and open discussion in terms of actually addressing some of the key issues that are needed for the multinational joint task force to work and for Buhari to be able to have hands-on on Boko Haram.
Ahmad Mesdoua, is this a step in the right direction for you, or does much more need to be done?
No, absolutely. It's a good first step. It's absolutely vital that Nigeria and Cameroon cooperate on an issue that affects them both, and indeed the whole region. The partnership that they managed to establish at an operational level militarily will actually play a great part in, either putting the Boko Haram issue to rest or it getting worse. I think we've seen in the past a few months what happens when different states in the region collaborate. We saw when Chad and Niger and the Nigerian authorities, really operated jointly and on a military level, the successes that were presented. So this plan can only be a good thing. I think the symbolism of this visit that President Buhari is making to Cameroon is quite significant. And therefore, this can only be a good first step in the right direction. It remains to be seen what the collaboration will look like practically, on the field. But for now, I think it's a very good step, a commendable one.
Let's talk more about that aspect of it then. Martin Aoui, what about the command and control structure of this operation? How's this going to work, and who's ultimately going to be in charge of this?
Well, I think this is one of the issues that Buhari is going to or has been addressing with the Cameroonian counterpart, because I think initially there were some resistance to Buhari's proposal that Nigeria should have the permanent commander for this particular force. I think the idea of the other countries was that the command center should be actually rotating, the commander should be rotating, which means that if Nigeria is to have the commander for the next 6 months, it should switch to another country. But Buhari insisted that in order for the force to be actually stabilized, it is important that they have a permanent commander who is going to be a Nigerian. And by the way, the headquarters of the force is going to be in N'Djamena, Chad, and the structures are already being erected for the center to start operation, I think in the next couple of days. So I think that the multinational joint task force, what is really confusing or what is not clear about is what is going to be the role of the forces on the ground now. Cameroon, for example, has deployed up to about 8,500 soldiers and police as part of giving the new addition of 2,000 troops and police that Biya has ordered to be deployed in the far north province. One is not really clear. To some extent, one could say the multinational joint task force is already working. What might be necessary is the need for more coordination, the need for this force for regular meetings between the commanders of these different forces, and for the actual commander, the person who is going to command all of these forces, who is going to be the Nigerian, which we don't know yet, to be appointed. And I think without that, again, we will still be beating around the bush for this force to be operational. What is also not clear is, are these countries going to deploy new forces? Is Cameroon expected, after deploying 8,500 soldiers and police on the ground, is it expected to deploy more as part of this multinational joint task force? I think these are critical questions that we, especially being the outsider, need to know. It might be clear among the drafters of the members of the multinational joint task force. It is not still clear to the public.
Ahmed Mazdoua, in all fairness to President Buhari, he's only been in the job for 2 months, but just in that short time, we mentioned in the top there's been a major spike in attacks in Nigeria by Boko Haram. He's got a real fight on his hands, hasn't he, in taking them on?
Yeah, and I think there's very little doubt that that's his first policy priority at the moment. Certainly, if you look at the decisions President Buhari has already taken in his first few months in office, most of them are either security related or relating to the armed forces. So he's already appointed new service chiefs. The new chief of staff for the armed forces is Major General Buratai, somebody who was actually named the initial commander of the multinational joint task force. He's also, ordered, one of his first decisions was to order that the headquarters, the operational headquarters of the operations overseeing the fight against Boko Haram, that they be moved to Maiduguri, which is, closer to where the battle is. I think the spike that you mentioned reflects more the situation Boko Haram is in rather than the situation the Nigerian armed forces are in at the moment. Boko Haram has been greatly diminished as a result of the different operations I mentioned earlier that the regional states, had over the successes they had in the past few months. The fact that Boko Haram was pushed out of the major towns in the northeast that the group once controlled has led it now to to turn towards asymmetric warfare by carrying out all of these suicide attacks that we've seen in the past few months. So I think it is a policy priority. Security is the policy priority for President Buhari. And I think we've seen in the past few months his first few months in office have been very much geared towards solving security issues, and we've seen that even on his visits abroad. His first visits were to his neighbors, Niger and Chad, now Cameroon, and when he visited the United States and the United Kingdom and indeed Germany, the focus was very much on security, and for example, even when it's not around security, about reconstructing or rebuilding areas in the northeast affected by Boko Haram.
When we look at Boko Haram, this is a group that appears to be very mobile and resilient in the face of government attacks. How much is that down to the government's own perceived ineffectiveness and the failures of the Nigerian government?
I think that one should not prosecute the Nigerian government or the other government for the current Boko Haram attacks. These were always going to happen. These kind of attacks were always going to occur. Because if you look at the literature of terrorism, especially in a country like Nigeria, where terrorism has such a long history, terrorists, they are part of politics, so they monitor the political evolution, they monitor economic evolution, and they take advantage of it. The literature says that at the beginning of every term, you are bound to have more terror attacks. Why? Because now terrorists will want to test the new waters. Terrorists will want to test where the new leadership is going. What is the direction of the new leadership? And they want to establish themselves as a force to reckon with. Because if Boko Haram were to keep quiet, I don't think that Buhari will take them seriously. I don't think that Buhari will even offer to negotiate. I don't think that Buhari will even worry about them at all. Boko Haram will not be a priority. But I think it's because of the way they have stamped their feet on the ground by carrying out so many attacks, very deadly for that matter, that Buhari is by force bound to take measures to actually prioritize the fight against Boko Haram.
Cameroon is one of the countries that has suffered cross-border attacks by Boko Haram. And after a string of Boko Haram attacks last year, Cameroon sent almost 1,000 soldiers to its border with Nigeria. Only 2 months later, Boko Haram fighters were back, attacking villages and kidnapping their inhabitants in northern Cameroon. So, as we said, Cameroon has joined Nigeria, Chad, Niger and Benin as part of a regional force against Boko Haram. And Cameroon has just announced it is sending 2,000 extra soldiers to join that fight. Martinelli, what do you think Cameroon's role is in all of this? What do you think they bring to this?
I think that we should not over-exaggerate the strained relation between Cameroon and Nigeria, because I think this might only be in some portions of their relationship, because I think the two countries have lived peacefully for decades. The people from these two countries are friends, they are brothers, they are sisters. There are millions of Cameroonians in Nigeria, millions of Nigerians in Cameroon, and they normally don't see this strained relation as it doesn't really affect them. So it's more of an artificial issue that exists between the two governments. And I think it was the issue of Bakassi that really brought out the strained relation, in the sense that Nigeria favored a different approach and Cameroon also favored a different approach to the Bakassi issue. But finally, the two governments agreed on the conclusion that was passed by the International Court of Justice, and they are actually respecting it. The challenge, however, has been the tendency in Nigeria to somehow question the judgment of the International Court of Justice, to the extent that some were even protesting and requesting the Nigerian authorities to take back Bakassi. And I think this is where Cameroon has been a little strained in the relationship with Nigeria. But apart from that, I think these two countries enjoy favorable relations, and I think Buhari is going to capitalize on this. And I think this should be actually what should come out of this visit of Buhari to Nigeria, to strengthen what the two countries have done best, also taking into consideration the fact that there are millions of Nigerians living well in Cameroon peacefully, and there are millions of Cameroonians living in Nigeria peacefully. So we should not really overemphasize on what is purely a governmental issue. So sure. What Cameroon is going to take from this visit, or particularly from this relationship with Nigeria, is that Cameroon will be looking forward to strengthen this relationship, because I don't think it works best for Cameroon to have this strained relation with Nigeria. So okay. the one also that they put this into the past, and then look forward to a stronger relationship to fight Boko Haram. Okay,
I just want to bring the discussion back then to Boko Haram briefly in the couple of minutes that we have left. And Martin Ewi, I just want to pick up on a point that you mentioned earlier about how you characterize these recent suicide attacks by the group as an act of desperation. Some would say that nevertheless they continue to draw in new recruits. There is something out there that still sustains them. What do you think that is, and what needs to be done about it?
Yes, it is true. They are recruiting. They're using force to recruit. They're also using money to recruit. They're using all sorts of tactics to recruit. But the literature on counter-terrorism says that a group, and even if you look at it empirically, there is no group that will sustain over years, tactics that rely on suicide bombing. Because each time you carry out a bomb, you lose somebody. But to what extent would they be able to rely on these recruitment sources? Because we are already seeing some of these sources drying off, whether in Nigeria or in Cameroon or in Chad. They are actually looking for new sources in Niger, in Chad also. So, but this cannot be sustained over time. It cannot. What the group, and what we have seen over time, what has been the most deadly tactic of the group is this direct confrontation with the military, or when they come to a village and shoot down population, burn down places. I think these are the most deadly tactics than the suicide bombing itself. Yes, people die through these suicide attacks. Yes, suicide attacks are very dramatic. They are very deadly, but not anything compared to when the group actually move into a village and right. You have 100 guys all shooting at innocent population.
All right, that's going to have to be the last word. Martin Ewi and Ahmed Mesdoua, thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And thank you for joining us once again. We're always keen to hear from you. Just get in touch with us online on our program page on aljazeera.com, or you can post your comments to us on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. We're also on Twitter. You can tweet us using @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hazem Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.